Welcome back to Following the Call, Living the Sermon on the Mount Together. We are at chapter 12 in the book, and it's about persecution. So I'm just going to start us off here by reading chapter 5 from Matthew, verse 10 through 12. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So, Rich, what were your thoughts after reading this chapter?
I had a lot of thoughts, really. There were some great readings from the early church father Jerome, basically saying, if you're not being persecuted as a Christian, look out. And then from Jeanne Davenport, who talks about the call to bear witness in the midst of darkness and how that will provoke reactions, negative reactions.
And then you also start getting this theme that kind of runs throughout the chapter about how just living the new order, living out God's commands, threatens the entire system, that the world order, what is not of God. So that is what provokes persecution as well. It's not just like a surface situation.
Not just words, right?
Yeah. Or a personal situation.
Right. And then Oscar Romero, the archbishop, Catholic archbishop who was assassinated for his in El Salvador because of the way he spoke, stood up to the government authorities. Amazing man. And then the last section by Jeanne DeCelles, who speaks about the costs of discipleship. So really important themes. But persecution is to me, it's a tricky situation, right? Because we live in a moment where people love to claim the badge of victimhood.
Exactly.
People love to be the persecuted and the marginalized, and that's almost. And I just don't think that that's what we're talking about here. The response to the response to perceived slights. And then also, Christians, some Christians make it their business to be obnoxious and then generate negative reactions. And is that really persecution? Is that being persecuted for the sake of Christ?
Yeah.
So just because we get treated badly, or we perceive that we're being treated unjustly, is that really what this beatitude is talking about? And I kind of think it's not, because the response, right? And I think Jeanne Davenport speaks about this. The response to being persecuted or being treated unjustly should be one of rejoicing. He writes, rejoice in this beatitude is an exhortation to act in a way opposite to the reviling, persecution, and slander normally would lead one to act. Do not be made to doubt or to be ashamed by the reviling. Do not respond with violence or revenge. Do not spend a lot of effort and time attempting to correct the lies laid out by the slanderers. So I think, as you suggested earlier, we're going to be persecuted as Christians or as followers of Jesus if we simply live out his commands.
Yeah. And that's the litmus test that then Jeanne DeCelles talks about. Discipleship does have its costs. Anyone who dared to bring the gospel to bear on his or her own life knows that. Whether we feel it or not may be a good litmus test for discerning if we are truly following on his path or pursuing a false trail. And I think that's kind of what it comes down to, is you can easily be a victim if you are pursuing a false trail, or I don't know, I guess to your point about that, what I was thinking about, how in our society maybe it's more a battle of like rhetoric and slander, and less obvious persecution, like physical persecution, that there are parts of the world that are deeply embroiled in that, and it means something to be a Christian or to follow Christ could mean death. So that's a lot more blatant, but I think, like you're saying, if you look at the reactions, the people that are facing that physically often have this deep joy in their faith, and that's so evident. I also think a lot about people like, Oscar Romero is a great example, but also Dietrich Bonhoeffer, some of the people that actually died for their faith. A
Yeah.
really good example of that in history.
Yeah. I mean, I personally I don't think I've ever experienced persecution or anything like that. But
But what do you think
we can-
about like misunderstanding? Do you think? I mean, I think we all can relate to our faith like being a source of tension or causing misunderstanding, but that doesn't rise to the level of persecution that we're talking about here. Or does that have any sort of like interplay?
Yeah, I mean, there's people I know like who've experienced, I guess, sort of being put to the side, like especially in like the university environment when they represent their faith values. So, yeah, does that rise to the level of persecution? I guess it does.
In
People
some
insult
ways.
you, falsely say all kinds of evil against you. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I don't think it's the same level as you say, like Christians in other countries experience. I think my biggest takeaway from this chapter is our response.
Yes.
Is how do we respond when bad things happen to us because we are trying to follow Jesus and live out his teachings. We should respond by not getting negative and fighting back, but by being happy and rejoicing and knowing that we're trying to be part of this new order, this new way of living and being, and it's not worth getting upset.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's not like through our own personal power, because you can be, like the way I see it is you don't want to descend to that level because you're just kind of embracing the darkness that is the root of that kind of persecution. But if you kind of look towards the light, and that's Jeanne Davenport talks about that as well, to challenge the darkness and to embrace that is going to cause a positive reaction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots to think about here, and actually, I guess I was most challenged a bit by this word from Jerome.
Yeah.
You are deceived if you think that a Christian can live without persecution. He suffers the greatest who lives under none. I think it's actually really true for those of us who live in a relatively tolerant society. I think suffer as a result of not having more opposition to the way we live.
Mm-hmm. Because it affects our knowledge of like the need for Christ and Jesus's teachings and words, I think.
Yeah, there's a greater temptation to conform to the world because there's not a lot of pushback.
Right.
So, that may also change though.
That's true.
As the world becomes less and less Christian.
I think it definitely will. I don't think there's any doubt about it, but it's fortifying ourselves for that and, standing with each other.
Mm-hmm. Very interested if anyone has thoughts on this, if you've experienced any form of mistreatment on account of your faith and what that's helped you to how that's helped you to think about what following Jesus means. So thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next week.